Hello, I am Laura Phillips, an Associate in the Employment Group. Today I'm going to talk about one of the more surprising announcements in the Chancellor's summer budget, that the UK Government will introduce a compulsory national living wage for all staff over 25 years of age. Currently, as you know, we have a national minimum wage for those aged 21 and over. At this time, the national minimum wage rate is £6.50 per hour. This rate is set by the Low Pay Commission, who review the figure annually. Following review, any rate increases are made in October of each year. The next rate change is due on the 1st of October 2015, where the national minimum wage will be increased from £6.50 per hour to £6.70 per hour for workers 21 and over. The new national living wage, which is due to be implemented in April 2016, will effectively raise the national minimum wage to £7.20 per hour for those aged over 25, essentially creating a new national minimum wage tier rate for the over 25s. This figure is set to rise to £9 per hour by 2020. Following the commencement of the national living wage, the Low Pay Commission has been tasked with deciding how the national living wage will reach the target of £9 by 2020. Additionally, going forward, they will recommend any future rise to the national living wage rate, as they do currently for the national minimum wage. I would like to add at this point that the national living wage is not to be confused with the living wage. The living wage is a recommended rate of pay which is set by the Living Wage Foundation. The rate of pay is revised annually and reflects the amount people in and out of London need to earn in order to have a decent standard of living. Payment of this rate is entirely voluntary. The current living wage rates are £9.15 per hour for those in London and £7.85 per hour for those living elsewhere. Following the implementation of the national living wage, it is anticipated that 750,000 people will move from the national minimum wage to the higher national living wage rate. However, it has been estimated by the Office for Budget Responsibility that around 6 million people will be impacted by the introduction of the national living wage. For example, where employers tier their pay according to the national minimum wage, an increase in the bottom tier will inevitably trigger pay rises at the adjacent levels. In terms of figures, those that are over 25 who are currently on the national minimum wage will get 70p more per hour than the current rate, and 50p more an hour compared with the planned increase of the national minimum wage in October 2015. By 2020, individuals who are over 25 and working 35 hours a week, who were previously on the national minimum wage, will see their gross wages increase by around £5,200 in cash terms. Unfortunately for those under 25, the national living wage will only apply to those aged over 25, and they will therefore still receive the national minimum wage. The current rate for over 21-year-olds is £6.50 per hour and is due to increase to £6.70 per hour from October 2015. Obviously, the introduction of the national living wage represents an additional cost to both small and large businesses. In order to address this, corporation tax is being cut from 20% to 18% by 2020. Additionally, the Chancellor announced a 50% increase to the National Insurance Employment Allowance from £2,000 to £3,000, which will help small business owners to reduce their wage bill and could offset the increased cost from the national living wage. In reality, anticipating what impact the national living wage will have in the long run is tricky, as historically increases to the national minimum wage have been much smaller than the current proposal, which is on a different scale to what we've seen in the past. That being said, commentators have suggested the increase could lead to businesses passing on this cost to customers through higher prices. This in turn may then impact demand for products or services, which may then lead to job losses. In this regard, the Office for Budget Responsibility predicts that between 60,000 and 110,000 jobs may be lost as a result of these changes, with this number rising when the national living wage figure rises to £9 by 2020. However, they also predict that the new budget in total will create 1.1 million jobs, 700,000 of which will come after the national living wage is introduced. Therefore, this would significantly outweigh the losses. However, following the introduction of the national living wage, businesses may start to look to alternatives to manpower and favour the machine. A rise in automation of service could again lead to job losses. Further, the impact of the national living wage is likely to be greater for those who are not able to make the most of automation. Therefore, it is likely that large chain retailers or restaurants will be able to manage the increases more effectively, but smaller business may struggle to survive. Commentators also expect that in response to the introduction of the national living wage, more under-21s will be hired as a result, so that businesses can avoid paying the higher national living wage. However, we would like to point out that there could be a risk for employers if someone has applied for a job but is turned down because they are too expensive due to their age. It has also been anticipated that the introduction of the national living wage could scupper businesses' investment plans, as the increase is likely to eat into any surplus the business had set aside for investment, particularly if businesses are having to make wage increases across the board in order to maintain their current pay structure. Following the Chancellor's summer budget, there has been mixed reactions from businesses with regard to the national living wage, particularly those in the care, retail and hospitality industries. The Association of Convenience Stores called the introduction of the national living wage a reckless measure and warned that 24,000 shops could close because they would not be able to afford the higher wages. This was echoed by Sainsbury's boss Mike Coop, who warned that staff risked being forced to choose between higher pay and company perks. Additionally, Tim Martin, chairman of the British pub chain JD Wetherspoon, had said that the policy will hit the company hard at a time when the pub industry is already struggling with high costs and competition from supermarkets. The national living wage has also faced further criticism, as some critics have raised the national living wage to be implemented in 2016 is less than the current rate suggested by the Living Wage Foundation, which is £7.85 per hour as opposed to £7.20 per hour. Further, the national living wage does not take into account that those living and working in London have higher living costs than those who live elsewhere, a consideration which is factored into the living wage calculated by the Living Wage Foundation, who set the London living wage at £9.15 per hour. However, other retailers such as Iceland and Tesco have welcomed the change. Malcolm Walker, the founder of Iceland, has responded to negative treatment of the proposal by saying paying workers more is a win-win, as happy staff make for happy customers. Additionally, IKEA have set their sights even higher by stating that it would pay all of its 9,000 UK workers at least £7.85 per hour from April 2016. That's 65p more per hour than the national living wage. In summary, while the national living wage will be a cost to employers, there are practical steps employers can take to limit this cost pressure. For example, by looking at staff resourcing or looking at the working hours required of staff. Additionally, employers may also find that higher wages may lead to an increase in productivity and less labour turnover, which may actually save the business money. However employers decide to respond to the national living wage, they should be alive to the employment law consequences of any measures adopted and take care to avoid any legal consequences following the implementation of the national living wage. For further information on the national living wage or any other employment issue, please do not hesitate to contact a member of the Reed Smith employment team.